Hey guys, this is Mia. Welcome back to my channel. This is Creepy Time. I'm sorry that I haven't posted a video to my whole 12 subscribers. I appreciate you very much, and I'm sorry that I've been away. I just haven't been feeling well. I don't know, I caught something, so I've just been trying to get to work and get some rest so I can feel better eventually. But I'm back, and today we are going to be highlighting an alien abduction story in today's episode. I'm calling them episodes now because I want to feel important. So today's episode of Creepy Time is going to be about an alien abduction, and we're going to be doing something a little bit different. I feel really awkward just sitting here and kind of talking to the camera, so I'm going to be occupying myself by crocheting, and we're going to be calling it Creepy Crochet. Because why not? It rhymes, or not rhymes, but they go together, you know? So Creepy Crochet today is going to be talking about aliens. So I would like to throw out a disclaimer, that if you're triggered or you're sensitive to topics like this, I kindly ask that you skip this video, and none of the research is mine. I don't claim anything. I don't have any rights to it. It is not my own. And the websites that I pull a lot of info off of and that I use are going to be linked down below if you want to check them out and get some more info yourself. So let's dive in. Today I'm going to be crocheting, or begin crocheting, another eyeball. Little eyeball here, complete with optic nerve. I can't talk today. English is hard. So my friend wanted one, and I figured it would be a good place to start. So today we are going to be talking about Betty and Barney Hill. And this is actually like the first reported, or from what I've gathered or I've come to understand, this is like the first reported alien abduction. First reported alien abduction story. Not to say that it's the first alien abduction that ever happened, but the first one that the world has known about. So a little bit about Betty and Barney. They were a they've passed. So they were a newly married couple at the time. And, they had moved in together as newly married couples do. And they were just living it up. They were living the dream. They were really happy with their new life, and they were busy working. Betty was a social worker. Obviously, I feel like that she's a social worker for the state or something, so she helped in child cases. So she was a children's social worker. And then we have Barney, who worked for the mail service, the United States Postal Service. So he would, deliver the mail and sort it and what have you. He had a really long commute to work. I guess it was, it was like 40 or 60 miles each way. I think it was 60 miles each way to work. So 120 total miles spent commuting to and from his job. And as you can imagine, that leads to like burnout. I mean, I would be exhausted, and Betty's job was tough. I mean, I'm not sure if I have or will ever have it in me to be a social worker for children. I mean, you gotta believe that she probably sees some tough stuff and sees a lot of things. So, and I just messed this up. What am I doing? I'm like trying to do a granny square, not a pupil. Okay, anyway. So they were both really active in their community. They were a biracial couple, and the only reason I bring that up is because this was like the 50s and 60s, where this kind of thing was not typically seen, really, unfortunately. They were really hard times, and they were really ignorant times. I feel like that is the best way to describe that era. So they were a biracial couple, and they were really big in their community. They were members of the NAACP, They were just generally community leaders. They were active in the Unitarian congregation, and Barney sat on the local board for the Commission of Civil Rights. So really just strong people. I don't know how they found time to do all of that with what they were already doing, but they sure as heck did, and they did the damn thing, so good for them. They eventually, like I mentioned, got kind of burned out. So they decided to take like a belated honeymoon, because they didn't go on a honeymoon when they first got married. They just jumped right into life. So they wanted to take a belated honeymoon, and they did. And they wanted to go to Montreal, and they wanted to go see the Niagara Falls. So they hopped in the car, and I guess it was like I said, like a last minute thing. They left so fast, it's reported that they only had $70 like on them. They didn't even go to the bank. Bless you. That's Sam. That's my cat. Very sneezy cat. We've taken him to the vet, and the vet says he's fine. So, anyway, so they decided to go on this last minute honeymoon, and only had $70 in their pockets, hopped in the car and started driving. So they went to Montreal, they went to the Niagara Falls, they had a really, really great time, and they, at the end of 3 days, are you okay? At the end of 3 days, they decided to come back. So this is where it gets interesting. I guess there was a storm that was coming, like a big fat storm, and they didn't want to get caught in it driving, so they were trying to beat the storm. So they decided that they were going to drive overnight. So on their way back, they were on, what road was it? US Route 3. And what is it called? I'm going to pronounce it wrong. Franconia Notch. Anyway, they were around there. And that's where they were headed, like the direction that they were headed. So they were on US Route 3. They decided to stop in Virginia for coffee because they were like exhausted. And they wanted to drive through the night to beat the storm. And they were hoping that by 2 or 3 in the morning, they would get back to their house. Around, like 2 or 3 in the morning, they would get back to their house. So they, when they stopped for coffee, they were really, really tired, and it was decided that Barney was going to drive. Okay, so Betty just couldn't do it, and so Barney was just going to drive. So they started driving. Betty was in the passenger seat, and they were going, and all of a sudden they both notice that there is like a light that is following them, or they perceive that the light is following them, and they can't really figure out what the heck it is, only that it's really freaking them out. So Barney's driving. Betty decides to break out her binoculars and try and get like a closer look at what the heck this thing is. So she looks through her binoculars and she can't really make out what it is. And so they keep on driving, and Barney was, I think he was military. I think he was in the Air Force. In any case, he worked with planes. And Barney was like, don't worry about it. Like, it's like a satellite that's all messed up. It's like, it's nothing that you need to be concerned with. So just don't worry about it. And so she's like, okay. So she like rolls over and like tries to get back to sleep. But that light is getting bigger and it's getting brighter. And they're starting to get really, really freaked out. And Barney is like, okay, well, I'm not 100% concerned yet, but I'm definitely like confirming that this is weird. So why don't we pull over and take a break? We'll walk Delcy. Delcy is their dog. They took their doggo with them. Delcy is their dog, so we'll walk Delcy, and we are going to just try and take a look at what this is. So Betty is in charge of the dog, and she is taking her out to go potty or whatever it is that she's doing, and Barney decides to go out in the, like, I guess it was like a field, like I don't want to say like a cornfield, but like that would be typical, right? Cornfield. No, so he goes out in this field, and he's gonna take a closer look at this darn thing. And this pupil is just not working with me today. Anyway, so he decides to go look at the darn thing, and he takes the binoculars and he goes out there. Well, he loses it. I don't know what he sees. Oh no, I do. He sees like a crack. He can't identify what it is, but it's like a saucer, like your stereotypical like UFO saucer. And there's rows of windows, and he sees like beings in the windows, and there's like I guess the way he describes it is like, yeah, there's rows of windows, and like right in the middle, like on the top window, there's what he assumes to be like the leader that's just watching. So he freaks out, naturally so, and he runs back to the car, and he like tells Betty, get in the car, leave everything, grab the dog, get in the car, we've got to go, we've got to get out of here. And Betty's like, what the heck is your problem? And so then in the car, he's like frantically trying to describe to her what it is that he saw, when all of a sudden this light that they were watching this whole time, or initially they thought was a darn satellite, lands on top of their car. And the next thing they know, they're home. They don't remember any of this at all. They just don't. It's not a memory that was kept. And they like wake up and they just feel off. And Barney feels the need to like examine himself like down there. And Betty just feels sick and just doesn't feel good at all. And they can't remember what happened. So as they're trying to like process this information, they are like going about their lives. They're like working and doing whatever it is that they, you know what, this darn pupil is just not. I'm gonna switch to my brain because I'm crocheting a brain too, okay? I don't know what's happening with that pupil. It's not happening, that's what's happening. Okay, so poor Betty, right? She doesn't feel good at all. She feels like garbage, and they're really trying to understand what happened to them. They remember a light, okay? They remember that there was something weird. They remember that Barney remembers that he saw like a craft that he can't identify. But then they don't remember how they got home or what happened to them. So as they're going about their lives, trying to process this information, trying to like live their lives to the best of their ability, they decide to start seeing a therapist. And the therapist recommends hypnosis to try and recall the events that happened to him, to them. So they agree to undergo hypnosis because traditional therapy wasn't working. And hypnosis was something that was really big in the world, in like the therapy world in that time. And this was 1961 was the year that this happened. To be perfectly specific, their abduction happened September 19th, 1961. So that was something that was really popular in that time. And so they were like, okay, yeah, sure, whatever, I just want to know what the heck happened to me. So they were hypnotized separately. They were not hypnotized together. So they each had individual sessions. And they were able to finally recall a lot of the events that happened to them. So basically, they remembered that craft landed on top of their car, and it shone like, I believe they said it shone like a bright white light. And the next thing they know, they are inside the craft. They are inside of it. And they are separated inside the craft as well. So what Betty remembers is being laid down on a table by these beings that were like small. They were smaller than them, but they weren't exactly like tiny, okay? They were smaller than them. They had large eyes. They were gray, but they didn't look, if I'm remembering correctly, they didn't look far from like a human. It wasn't like, you know how you see in the movies where it's these gray little men with like all distorted limbs and distorted faces and no noses and these gigantic like black eyes. Like, that's not how they described them. They were humanoid but looked like slightly different. And so they were laid down, or Betty was laid down on a table, and they were taking samples of Betty. They took strands of her hair. They took scrapings of her skin. They examined, like they took her fluids, and they examined them all under a microscope, I guess to find out, you know, the cellular composition of, you know, humans' bodies and the, you know, different things that we produce. And then she remembers a large needle being inserted into her navel, in her abdomen obviously, but like into her navel. And she recalls this to be like a pregnancy test. So that's how she remembers this to be. That was their type of pregnancy test. And she was speaking to the beings, and they were speaking back to her, but not in English, but she was able to like understand what they were saying somehow. And so it's actually kind of, there was a quote. What did it say? I'm sorry. It's just such a good quote that I just want, oh, here it is. Okay. So later, at some point, Betty was alone with the leader, and Betty asked where the craft had flown from, like where it came from and where they exist, basically. And the leader said, well, she perceived him to be the leader because he wasn't doing any of the testing. So she perceived him to be the leader because he was just observing. So then the leader said, if you don't know where you are, there wouldn't be any point in telling you where I am. So that's what she remembers, and that came to her either through hypnosis or through a dream. But that's what she remembered. And later, she drew like a star map, just like this random star map of somewhere in the universe. So I think that she like maybe found out where these beings were, and that is a star map to them. So then poor Barney, so Betty's abduction was pretty traumatic, and poor Barney, he had his clothes taken off. Same with Betty, but he had his clothes taken off. They took strands of hair. They took his toenail clipping, like nail clippings. They took, again, scrapings of skin, and they were examined on like glass slides, similar to like microscopy, basically. And like needles were placed on him and then like wires were connected to the needles. I don't know, he doesn't know what they were trying to determine, but they were like probed into like his head and his extremities and on his body. And oh, I forgot to mention that the needle that was inserted into Betty's belly was like 4 to 6 inches long. It was like this giant needle. Okay, so anyway, Barney, because of the war and everything else that he went through, wore dentures. He didn't have like his own teeth, and I guess the beings like examined his dentures, and that they were like so excited and fascinated that his teeth were removable, not knowing, I suppose, what dentures were. They were just like, this dude's teeth come out, dope. Like, they were just like totally all about that. And they just literally probed like every single ounce of him. And then later, remember how I said when he woke up and he felt the need to like examine himself down there, like examine his genitalia, he thinks that they did something to his genitals that he can't remember even with hypnosis. So after they were able to recall all of this information, like, what do you do? Can you imagine? Like, what do you do, like, knowing, like, all of this stuff happened to you and not being able to process it? Well, they continued with their therapy, but Barney developed, like, severe anxiety and just general, I don't want to say anger, but he wasn't comfortable anymore. And nobody would believe him, of course. So Betty had lots of nightmares, very vivid nightmares about what happened, but more often than not, she couldn't remember like a lot of it when she woke up, so she couldn't really identify if these were new pieces of information or if like it was just, you know how dreams are, you totally remember it like 3 seconds after you wake up from it and then just leaves your brain. So, and remember how I said that conversation with the leader came to her in a dream? Yeah, it was like one of those nightmares that she was having after she woke up. So then they decided to report it to the United States Air Force, because knowing what they knew, they couldn't just go ahead and like not report that to anyone. So they reported it to the Air Force, and as expected, they were not taken seriously at all. There was this one Air Force officer. Let me see if I wrote his name down. I'm assuming it's Major Paul Henderson. Isn't that so bad when you can't read your own handwriting, you guys? Okay, yeah. So they spoke with a Major Paul Henderson, Paul W. Henderson, and he basically turned around and told them that, what did he say? That you misidentified the planet Jupiter. So, all right, yeah, hear me out. I understand that planets are visible from Earth, like when they come into certain alignments. I understand that you are able to see planets, but how does one extrapolate that or come to that conclusion after somebody's told you these super detailed like stories about what happened to them? Like, yeah, I was taken into a craft, I was probed, but I misidentified the planet Jupiter. So after that, Mr. Henderson turned around and turned it over to Project Blue Book, which is an actual like UFO research project that is held by the United States Air Force. So they look into all this kind of stuff. They never had any, what would you call it, like vindication over it. It was just basically like, okay, well, you seem pretty serious. I'm sorry that happened to you. I'm turning it over to Project Blue Book. And that was kind of it. They went on to write their own book. Actually, Barney went on to write his book, but they went into detail about what happened to them, and I forget the name of the book, if you guys wanted to check it out or buy it. But I read little excerpts from it, and it's pretty detailed, and it sheds a lot more light on what they actually went through. But that is the first alien abduction that was actually reported, and these poor people, they went through it, and they were not able to like fully overcome what they went through. And I'm really, really happy that at least Barney was able to write a book. It was both of their stories, so I feel bad just saying that Barney wrote it, but that Betty and Barney were able to write a book about their experiences and share it with the world, because it's really important. Unfortunately, they have since passed. Barney actually passed away about 10 years after the incident. It was like, I don't remember the exact year of his death, but like if this happened in 1961, he passed away in like the late 1970s. So maybe almost 20, maybe it's like 15 years after this happened is when he passed away. And it makes me kind of wonder if this abduction had anything to do with his passing, because they were relatively young when this happened. This wasn't like, it wasn't like this happened in their 70s and then he died in his 80s. This happened, they were a newlywed couple, which, I mean, okay, people get married at all stages of life, but more typically, or more, commonly, people are married young. They're like 20s, 30s, maybe 40s. But yeah, Barney passed about 10 years after this incident, and Betty passed, I don't want to say shortly after Barney, but she passed after Barney. And they are buried side by side very happily, and their book and their stories continue to live on to this day. I recommend taking a look at, if you just Google Betty and Barney Hill, that was their last name, Hill, all of their stuff will pop up, and so will the name of his book. I recommend reading, if not excerpts of it, reading the whole thing. I really want to get it. So that is the story of their abduction. And I really want to thank you guys for watching. I really appreciate you. And maybe by the time I come back, this brain will be almost finished. Fingers crossed. I don't know if anyone's going to watch this video, but if you are interested in crocheting, I don't know whether I should do like a tutorial. Like, my brain already has a hard enough time multitasking. Like, I trip over my words all the time, you guys hear me. So I wonder if, like, I was able to successfully crochet and talk at the same time. I can walk and talk at the same time. Pat myself on the back for that one. But if you guys want, like, a tutorial, I can, like, maybe creepy crochet can become a thing, and it could just be a very basic, like I could teach you guys how to crochet either like a small eyeball or like a creepy granny square or something while I elaborate on some creepy story. Let me know what you guys think. Like I said, if anyone watches this, go ahead and leave it down below in the comments. If you really like creepy stories, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Every click helps me, and I just want to share like this cool stuff that I find. So hope you guys had a wonderful holiday, whatever holiday you celebrate, and if you don't celebrate anything, I hope you guys have had a wonderful month of December. All right, take care.